Most of us have played this game for over a decade, and while a lot has changed, memories from the good old days still remain clear as day. Whether it be training at hill giants to afford that schmick mithril armor, following Zazima around spamming his name, or god forbid, attempting to get your armor trimmed. It's fair to say, we had a hell of a ride. And one of the most exciting accomplishments you could achieve was finally getting your hands on that item that you've had your eyes on. Which is exactly what we'll be exploring today, RuneScape's most iconic items that will no doubt get those nostalgia bones tingling. First up, we have the illustrious discontinued rares. These are items that came into the game, and unlike on old school RuneScape, they were limited edition, never to be released again, meaning they are now worth a fortune on RuneScape 3. Party hats are probably the first item that comes to mind when you think about rares. They were released during a Christmas event in 2001 by JMods, who dropped Christmas crackers on the ground.
And I was actually involved in sort of dropping the crackers for people to get the party hat. The very first drop events, I know we actually had to manually give them to our mod accounts and drop them behind us as we went. And you had to have the players following the mods along, trying to sort of pick up the holiday events.
Players could use the crackers on each other for a 50-50 chance of receiving a random coloured party hat. As most of you probably know, the blue party hat went on to become a symbol of absolute elitism. These also came in red, yellow, white, green, and purple. Interestingly, the purple party hats, which at the time were actually called pink party hats, were originally the rarest of the set, but due to a duping glitch in 2003, many more flooded into the game, pushing the blue party hat into the #1 slot. Duping a party hat is something that most of us probably dreamed about as a kid, let alone owning one. And of course, we can't talk about party hats without talking about Christmas crackers. These ended up being worth more than party hats, but were not able to be worn or wielded. Using a cracker on another player would result in one of you receiving a random party hat, with a chance of 32 out of 128 for red, 28 out of 128 for yellow, 23 out of 128 for white, 20 out of 128 for green, 15 out of 128 for blue, and 10 out of 128 for purple. In 2002, during the Halloween event, players were once again treated with some tradable cosmetic rewards, those being Halloween masks.
Well, I was in the game when Halloween masks were dropped all over the place by that automatic thing you described, and I saw one, picked it up, thought, this is stupid, what is this? Put it back on the ground and walked off.
They originally looked quite different to the masks we have today, but received a graphical update when the game switched from Classic to RuneScape 2. Worth a bit less than party hats, these bad boys were still extremely desired by the player base. I don't know about you, but I used to dream about having a red Halloween mask with dragon armor. Another item released during the 2003 Halloween event was a non-tradable rare, that being the scythe. This item was peak Fashionscape. There's also a golden scythe, which was given to only 25 players during RuneFest 2011. Making it one of the rarest items in the entire game. And who can forget about the much loved Santa hat? Released during a Christmas event in 2002, it was a symbol of status, while also looking extremely snug. This matched with the gnome scarf was a killer combo. Now moving on from cosmetics to something a bit more durable. One thing we all wanted at some point in our RuneScape journey was a shiny new piece of armor. One of my favorite sets was the Black Armor G. Released in 2004, this bad boy set had even the biggest noob looking like an absolute pro. I remember killing what seemed to be a ridiculous amount of goblins at the time to get the 10 defense required to wear it. Oh, and while we're talking about nostalgic items, something extremely iconic is a YouTuber asking for their viewers to subscribe to their channel. So press that subscribe button for those nostalgic feels. Moving on, how could we possibly forget the iconic Rune God armor? Released in 2004, if a player walked past you wearing this, it was almost certain you'd follow them asking for money. I remember there was a heavy debate on whether Saradomin or Zamorak was the ultimate armor, with Guthix wearers seemingly sitting in the corner eating glue.
Guthix! Shut up! Why are you guys so weird?
And if we're talking about armor, we must talk about Dragon. Dragon armor was the pinnacle of prestige back in the day. A dragon chain body, dragon Med Helm, and dragon legs would transform you into an elite level player. You'd have armies of noobs following you just begging for a moment of your time. Pair that with a Legends cape, desert boots, and mime gloves, you pretty much had finished the entire game. Or so it seemed. And don't get me started if you got yourself a hit points cape to match the outfit. You'd just about make your fellow players lose their minds. Another piece of armor that I personally idolized was the Tyrus Helm. Released in 2006, child me thought this helmet was absolutely amazing. For me, the Tyrus helmet alone was enough to get me to beg my mum for membership. And we can't do this video without mentioning Castle Wars armor. The red and blue armor was such an iconic set, and I personally remember wanting the blue and white armor so bad. I remember fantasizing about wearing it with the blue party hat and defense skill cape. Man, that would have been cool. An upgrade that many of us actually received was the granite body. These days, the dragon Med Helm, dragon legs, and granite body looks almost like a uniform for bots, but back in the day, this meant you were an absolute gamer. And what accompanies the most nostalgic armor pieces? Well, of course, our favorite iconic weapons. I'd say taking one of the highest slots is the Rune Scimitar. Released in 2001, this scimitar has been a staple for players young and old. Still a fantastic free-to-play weapon, its attack speed and decent stats was something to be feared. And of course, the Abyssal Whip, released with the Slayer skill in 2005. If you were one of the lucky few players to score this item early, you would have been followed around by crowds of people just in awe of your epic new weapon of mass destruction. Another weapon that I personally was obsessed with was the Granite Maul. Released in 2005, the Maul was predominantly used for its amazing special attack KO potential in PvP, or by noobs like myself who just loved the way it looked. And just as a side note, I came across this video I did on another item, the Granite Mace, about 14 years ago. I can't play the sound since it's 100% copyright, but I thought I'd mention it. And we must mention the Dragon Battle Axe. Released in 2002, its iconic special attack that released a mighty scream while raising your strength level was a symbol to your fellow players that you were ready for action. Another iconic item was the prestigious Dark Bow. After its release in 2007, players couldn't get enough of its epic special attack. I mean, it does look pretty cool, bringing some much needed style to the ranged skill. And of course, the Saradomin's sword, which was beloved for its epic looks, but also its kick-ass special attack. I mean, just look at it. Now, I'd also like to add some special mentions. Do you remember how popular elegant clothes were? Released in 2006, I remember World 2 would be filled to the brim with elite players flexing their elegant outfits with matching skill capes. Another staple fashionscape item was the Black Beret. Released in 2004, players loved to rock this beret around marketplaces as a symbol of style and status. And something still used to this day in free-to-play. How can we not mention the unforgettable fancy boots? Achieved by completing the security stronghold, these boots had the player base running around killing monsters in colourful socks. What's not to love? The Elemental Shield was also a sight to behold. I remember thinking this item was so prestigious back in the day, only to realise it was actually quite easy to obtain. It still looked absolutely awesome nonetheless. And another item of fashionscape that I personally loved was the Chompy Bird hat. Something about this tribal looking feather hat made the player look like such a Chad. Another honourable mention is the rock climbing boots. These boots were predominantly used for PvP since they had a decent strength bonus and were only 12 GP to buy. The boots actually became quite controversial. In 2010, Jagex decided to boost their in-game store price to 75k and the ALC price to 45k overnight, making some players who had large stacks of these items extremely rich.
We decided that we should rebalance the cost of the item. The downside of that, unfortunately, was that some players benefited from the change more than others. It was never any kind of like dodginess going on in terms of like making people millionaires overnight.
Rock climbing boots can be found in old school RuneScape as a joke. They are impossible to buy and therefore unobtainable. And if we're talking about iconic items, how can we not mention flax? Flax was almost a rite of passage for noobs, who were sent to the flax fields for endless hours in search of riches. I remember picking flax at Camelot for what seemed an eternity, just to make 100k, which at the time was a massive amount of money for me. It's funny to think I could have made so much more money doing something else for the same amount of time, but back then we didn't care. It was just fun trying to get your hands on a bit of extra GP. And of course we need to mention lobsters, a staple food for the player base back in the day. I remember fishing these bad boys at Karamja, with crowds of players sitting around smack talking and comparing fishing levels. These are still quite a popular food today in free-to-play, but unfortunately lobster fishing spots aren't packed like they used to be. Well, I hope you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, looking at some of RuneScape's most iconic items throughout the years. I no doubt missed a ton of items, so let me know what your favourite items were back in the day, and if you managed to actually get your hands on them. Please consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this, and throw a like on there as well. I'll be back next week with another video. Okay, bye.